For those who haven't been here and those who have been here, this is a weekly class, Wednesday mornings in English. I also teach a class in Hebrew, but that's on Thursdays. And we've had it for a number of years. We've gone through a whole bunch of cycles. We did Gemara stories, Agadita. We did, what else did we do? Why can't I remember?
Kohelet.
We did Kohelet one year, terrific. We did Root, that was great. And we did a few other things. And somehow last year, I think because
We did anti-Semitism.
but we didn't do that as a whole class. That might have been one time. That was like a
No, it
one-off.
was like the whole.
Oh, yeah, I know what we did. Megillat Esther.
Megillah Esther.
Finding Semitism and anti-Semitism in Megillat Esther. Thank you. Yes, so we did 3 Megillot already. That's pretty good out of 5. So we did that, and then we switched from anti-Semitism. It was important, but it was all hard and we finished the Megillah, so we didn't need to continue. And I had this idea because so many places, including HIR, started saying Tehillim, Psalms, regularly post October 7th. And there are many Psalms that are familiar to us or are used in different settings. I asked if people would want to learn Tehillim, really the popular ones or the more well-known ones. And really it was across the board. Everybody said yes. We have learned a whole bunch of them. And the more popular, 121, 23, 130, 27, which we say before Rosh Hashanah through Sukkot, 100, which is Mizmor LeTodah, a psalm of thankfulness, thanksgiving. We learned 150. And now we're embarking on 7 Mizmorim, 7 psalms. Why 7?
7 days of the week.
Oh, yeah.
7 days of the week. So what do you know about that, Judy Stiglitz?
Every day there's a different Shir Shel Yom psalm.
Shir Shel Yom means the psalm of the day.
Right.
So how many people are familiar with the fact that every day in davening, you're familiar, Hella? I mean, I'm not really counting. I just want to know if you were familiar with it. So I want you to know that during COVID, when every day sometimes felt like the day before, except for Shabbat, of course, because Shabbat, we don't do electricity and things like that. But one of the ways to kind of keep on track for those who came to davening or those who daven was that you said a different Shir Shel Yom for every day of the week. And as I was researching and learning about this whole idea of having different psalms for each day of the week, one of the comments that I read was that it gives a flavor and a shape to that day, which would be interesting if we could think about that as we learn them. Any thoughts about the saying a different psalm, what it was connected to, why we do it? Anybody have any knowledge about that? And full disclosure, I didn't have much knowledge about it before I started researching. Any thoughts? Okay, well, that's good because then we can all learn it together. And I do want to say on Shabbat, when a lot of us are in shul together, so we're very used to saying that psalm. But then when there's a holiday, a chag in the middle of the week, it feels like we should go say the psalm for Shabbat because it feels like the same setting. But actually, we go to the psalm of the day. The psalm of the day takes precedence no matter what day, even Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur comes out on let's say not on a Shabbat, during the week, like on a Monday. Yeah, it can come out on a Monday. So you would say the psalm of the day for Monday. So just so you know that cycle of every day of the week being a different psalm holds true no matter what else happens. Hello. Are you coming for the class? Woohoo! We got an in-person person. Stacy, say hello to the lovely people online.
Hi, I thought other people were coming in person.
We have, one person who comes in person is in Florida, so she will not be, and she's not online because she does other things when she's in Florida. Another woman went to an eye doctor. She often comes. Some of them are just not here.
Okay. That was me. Yeah, I know. I called the wrong place.
So one person here lives in Rochester. One of them is from Arlington?
Oh, not
West
everybody's
Virginia.
I'm Arlington.
Arlington. Yeah, no, not everybody's local. And even those who are local could be like, 5 towns local. So not Riverdale.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, terrific. So I will get you I'm just going to get a book. So you have something to look at. Just a moment.
Okay.
So as I said, we've been learning Tehillim, Psalms, and we just finished learning a whole bunch of popular, well-known Tehillim, and now we're embarking on the Tehillim for the 7 days of the week. Okay. I am going to, I have a printout for you. Yay. I did print out on the off chance that somebody would come. Just find it for you. Here. Give me a moment, people online. So before we're actually going to learn any of the Psalms, what we're going to do is talk about why the different days of the week have different Psalms, which I found really interesting. This is a way of framing it.
While you're waiting, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does each day at all correspond to the days of creation?
Nice. Did you just think of that? That's amazing.
Yes, because I was anticipating your question. I thought you were going to ask us what to think,
What do you think? Well, there you go. I guess when I was asking if anybody knows something, I was referring to that as well. So Judy is suggesting that perhaps the Psalms that were chosen have to do with the days of creation and what was created on each day. So we're going to see if that's true, or, it's something we'll at least keep in mind. I'll already tell you it's not a one-to-one correspondence, but because it doesn't actually really say anywhere what the reason is, but the Gemara imagines reasons and expounds on it, which we'll read what the reasons are. And also some modern commentaries have different reasons. Okay, there's a whole in Tractate Tamid. Tamid is actually what is the Tamid? Anybody know? What does the word Tamid mean?
Always.
Always. Like the Ner Tamid. Anybody heard of that? The Ner Tamid or the Ner
Yes.
Tamid?
Eternal.
Yes.
The eternal. So that's something that was always burning in the temple, and every shul generally has one. It's electricity today, but it's always burning. Ner Tamid. There's a constant light. The word Tamid means always. There were 2 korbanot offerings called the korbanot Tamid, one in the morning, one in the evening, and this describes it. So that's why Masechet Tamid. This is all about. I've never learned it myself, but I learned some of the Mishnayot because when I was preparing here. So there's a very long, the 3 dots here are actually a very long explanation of what the high priest did in order to offer the Korban Tamid. And then at the end of this very long description, which I didn't bring, the priest gave him wine to pour. And then the deputy high priest stands on one side and he's waiting with cloths in his hands to signal the Leviim, the Levites, because who did the singing and the music in the temple? Not the priests, not the Kohanim, but the Levites. Anybody here a Levi?
Me.
Cool, you're a Bat Levi. I'm sorry to tell you, Elaine, the women didn't do it.
Oh, okay.
You would not be referred to as a Levi. You would be referred to as a Bat Levi, the daughter of a Levi. Anybody here a Kohen? Oh, yeah, we have Lance as a Kohen. I don't know if I'm asked. So Lance might be one of I'm sorry that the women didn't do this stuff, but I'm not going to get into that now.
I have a question for you,
Yeah.
based on this. There's a very detailed description of what the Kohanim do, but
Right.
how do we know what happened in 583 years
What's
between
583 years?
the opening of the first temple and the destruction of the second temple? 583 years.
I don't understand your question. Can you explain your question?
Okay, my question is, how do you know the specifics of what the Kohanim did?
I only know from the Mishnah. That's what we know it
Yeah,
from.
but how did they know?
They're the
Were they-
ones. They're the ones who. Well, they put it down. What is the Mishnah? The Mishnah basically is a recording of the conversations and the traditions and the halachot that were practiced. That is what the Mishnah is. So that's how we know. Now, you might say, I don't believe it. That's your choice. But that's what I go to when I want to know what happened. And then the Gemara expounds on it. So the Mishnah gives us a small amount of information. It's very concise, usually, not this one. And then the Gemara expands on it. I mean, the question isn't so relevant for me because I don't know. I only know good. It's like a history book. So the Mishnah in this case is like a history book. If that's your question, unless I misunderstood your question.
No, I respect your appreciation of the Talmud.
This
I
is
think
the
that's
Talmud.
great.
This is the Mishnah. Yeah.
Okay, the Mishnah. I respect that. Unfortunately, my lens is different from yours.
Well, that's fine, but that's the source that I bring. I don't have a different source to bring. That is the source for the reason that we do. I'm talking about the Tehillim, the Psalms. Those who set up the Psalms, a different one for each day, are basing it on this. So the two
Bracha, my understanding is that the rabbis were originally lawyers who were there.
Wait. Is this relevant to why we pick the Psalms for each day? Is it relevant to that question? Because we're talking now about why there's a different Psalm for each day.
It's relevant divergently. I think divergently, that's the problem.
What is divergent? Well, what's the I have no problem with that. You think divergently. Do you have a different reason to offer about why we pick the Psalms up for each day?
Right, because from what I said, there is absolutely no correlation between what's in these Psalms and reality.
No, that I don't understand what you mean by reality.
In other words,
Yes,
this is all, to
Psalm.
me, to a professor of literature, this is all fiction.
Do you mean Mishnah is fiction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, but it's still, when the sages set up the prayers, they still based it on it. So that's still true. So you might think that's not what happened in the Beit HaMikdash. That's fine. But that is our history book for what happened in the Beit HaMikdash. Two priests stand at the marble table, and there were two silver trumpets in their hand. And remember, they're waiting with cloths to wave to the Levites, to tell them when to sing. And then the two priests sounded.
But Rabbani Bracha, if that's true, why don't we sing? Why don't we have musical instruments, which apparently they did? Is that correct?
You see right here, two trumpets in their hands.
Certainly David did.
And here, right here. Two silver trumpets in their hands.
There you go. Why don't we do
question?
that? Why don't we have trumpets and musical instruments on Shabbat?
Yeah, but that's a whole other discussion. You want a halachic discussion of why we don't do it? We can do that offline. That's not relevant to which psalm we pick for which day of the week.
All I'm saying is that from my perspective, what you're dealing with here presents problems.
Okay.
And the problem is that.
But Lance, I keep asking you a question. Is this relevant to which psalm we pick for which day of the week? Because that's our discussion right now. Not the halachic reasoning.
What difference does it make which psalm was picked for which day? In the psalm for Shabbat.
If it doesn't make a difference to you, then you don't have to attend the class. I think it's interesting. I daven every day and I use the liturgy, so I'm trying to explain the psalm. If it doesn't interest you, that's very legitimate.
Oh, it interests me. It interests me, but I just don't believe in it.
Okay. I'm not sure what you don't believe in, but can we park that for another discussion?
Sure.
Okay, great. Okay, the two priests sounded a tkiyah, long continuous blast, and then a truah, and then they sounded another tkiyah. So what does that do? That alerts the Levites to prepare to recite the psalm. So you have to understand that every day in the Beit HaMikdash, there was majesty and celebration, and it wasn't just only, and the tamid, by the way, was not an animal sacrifice. It was a meal offering for those vegetarians and vegans over here who might, have a hard time with or many of us who might have a hard time with animal offerings, but it is what was done then. The priests with the trumpets came and stood near Ben Arza, and then that person struck the cymbals, one on his right, one on his left. And then the high priest stooped to pour the libation of the wine. The deputy waved the cloths, and Ben Arza struck the cymbals, and the Levites recited the psalm of that day of the week. I once we did a family like tiyul, like a day with a tour guide, somebody who we know, who was telling us, because my daughter's name is Maria, and Har HaMoriah is the name of the mountain where the temple stood. And as we were walking near there, she said to my daughter, who was 11 or 12 at the time, was for her bat mitzvah, she said, "Do you hear it? Do you smell it?" And my daughter's looking at her like she's crazy. And she said, at the time when the temple stood, you would hear the Levites playing their instruments. You would smell the incense. It would be beautiful. It wasn't just a building. There was much more that was going on. The Levites recited the psalm of that day of the week. This is our first indication, I think it was the first one, that there was a psalm recited for each day of the week. Each psalm was divided into 3 sections, not that important. When they reached the end of each section, the priest sounded a tkiyah. The people in the courtyard prostrated themselves. And at the end of each section, there was another tkiyah, for every tkiyah, another prostration, etc., etc. And then, zehu seder dara, and then that is the procedure for the sacrifice or the offering. May it be God's will that it will be speedily rebuilt in our day. Amen. So we already know, when was this Mishnah written down? While the temple was standing?
Yes.
No, it's after, I think.
It
Isn't
must
it
be
in-
after, because what does it say? May it be God's will that it will be speedily rebuilt in our day. Amen. Now, why did they have to record it? When the temple was happening, when it was, they didn't have to record it because everybody knew what to do. I don't know that they recorded so many things. It wasn't like paper and pen, or like you have a computer to write things. But when they realized, when the second temple was destroyed, and they realized, how are we going to preserve our traditions? We need to write it down. And that's why they recorded it in here. Now we're going to look at the continuation. The next one is going to be, what did we just hear? That every day there was a different psalm. Now, remember who wrote at least most of the psalms? Who remembers?
David.
King David.
When did David live? Before or after the temples were built?
Whoa.
Before.
It must be before. Why? Because it was his son, Shlomo, who built the first temple. So just remembering that, we would know. So David and whoever else wrote, David wrote at least most of the Psalms. And then many years have passed, as Lance pointed out, even just between there was 70 years in between the destruction of the first temple, then the second temple lasted, you said 583 years. I don't know the exact number, but a long time has passed. And according to our tradition, the third temple would come with Mashiach, with the Messiah. So the sages knew this wasn't happening tomorrow. And that's why they decided to write down in the Mishnah what it was, what to do. That way we won't lose it. And then when Mashiach comes, we have the third temple, we'll be able to practice according to traditions. This is the very next Mishnah. Remember, this Mishnah was Tamid, chapter 7, Mishnah 3. You can turn to the other side. And Mishnah 4. This is a logical continuation of the previous Mishnah, which left us with, there were symbols, there was music, there was singing, and every day of the week there was a different mizmor. What would be your next question? What were those mizmorim? Which was sung each day? Following is a list of the daily psalm that the Levites would recite. So, it's in Hebrew, it's in English, and it's the different psalms. It's just so you see, for those who believe in the Mishnah and think that that is something that we follow, which in Orthodoxy, as far as I know, everybody follows the Mishnah, as far as I know. So this is where we take it from. But it doesn't say here what the reason is for each one. Does everybody see that? You can see the list, but nowhere does it say what the reason was. Everybody with me on that?
Yep.
Rabbi Bracha, I have
Hold on one second.
I have a point that is relevant.
Wait, hold on one second. Hold on one second, please. I want to put in, for those who wish, the link to this. I want to put in the link into the chat. So anybody who would like to look at this for whatever reason, you can just look it up on Svaria, but let me just put in the chat. So if anybody wants to look at it, they can. Yeah, one second. And hello, Felice. Yes, what did you want to say, Lance? Can we make it?
Okay.
Yeah.
If given what you just said about the symbols and the music and stuff like that,
yeah,
why isn't Psalm 150 one of the Psalms of the week?
So first of all, how could I possibly give you that answer? I'm not in the time of the Mishnah. I'm not in the time of the temple. I didn't set it up. You might say, if you were in the subcommittee that decided which Tehillim were said, you would have picked 150. But I can't answer you why they didn't pick it. All I can do is try to help figure out, given the seven of them, why they were picked. Like, how could I possibly answer that?
Who
Do you see what I'm
did,
saying?
who did decide though?
Psalm 150 is recited every day. That's true. Thank you, Helen. That is true. We recite it every day anyway. Good point. I'm sorry, who
No,
asked
but I
the
mean,
question?
who decided what was going to be recited each day? Do we know?
I mean, I might not have the name of the person who did it, but it
But
was
yeah.
certainly the sages at the time of the temple worship, the same way, everything that was interpreted and put into action, there was leadership. There was the Sanhedrin, there were the 70 sages who sat and decided. There were probably more, but those I think were the main ones. It could be Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, the men of the Great Assembly, I think it's called. And, but the actual name of the person, I can't tell you, was the people who were in the leadership. And the leadership was extremely centralized at the time of the temple. It was in Jerusalem. It wasn't like so much like today where there's leadership everywhere. Then it was still extremely centralized. That's why it was one of the reasons why it was such a big blow when the temple was destroyed. It wasn't just the temple. It was like that was the center of everything. There was only one big shul, pretty much. There was only one high court, pretty much. I'm sure that the towns all across Israel also had, but mostly it was in Jerusalem. Does that make sense? People have another question about that? Okay. Now, what happens after the temple is destroyed? Much of the, let me take my notes just a minute. Much of the practice of the temple, they actually had to decide which of the practices of the temple they would keep and which one they would not keep, because they wanted to keep it in people's memory and they wanted to keep the beautiful one. So, 1 second. Oh, but that's written somewhere else. 1 second. What else, for example? Oh, this, by the way, would answer a little bit of the question that Lance brought up. The 1 second, sorry. When the temple was destroyed, this is something that we have talked about many times. What happened? Remember, we said there was a huge break in people's joy and belief, and they thought their Jewish world was destroyed. So who remembers what I've said many times about what the sages did to revive Judaism at that point? Does anybody remember that? And it's okay if you didn't, but if somebody does.
We became rabbinic Jews instead of priestly Jews.
Yes, exactly. It became in the hands of the rabbis, rabbinic, as opposed to things being more biblical. We still do biblical commandments, of course. Yeah. But what the sages needed to do was to uplift the nation. A lot of people are in exile, are not in Israel. Some are in Israel. And they said, well, what can we do to give people hope? And they reimagined Judaism as opposed to being Jerusalem-centric and temple-centric. And they put into the hands of people, what did they say? Every shul and every house of study is a mikdash me'at. It's a little Beit HaMikdash, a little temple. And think of us today, like we just assume that. We just assume that every time we have a minyan or every time we come to shul, think of in the diaspora how much shuls are such a central part of our Jewish lives for many people. I mean, why am I teaching? Because I'm rabbi in a shul. I mean, obviously I could teach even if I'm not rabbi in the shul, but the people in the shul look towards the rabbinic leadership and to lead spiritually and to give extra level of spirituality, thought, Judaism, in addition to our day-to-day lives. So that was a big, big, big shift, but they still wanted to keep things that were in the Mikdash, the Beit HaMikdash. So, for example, we still blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, but we don't do it on Shabbat. And in the temple times, it was allowed to blow on Shabbat. And I'm not going to go into the halachic reasoning, but there's a slight shift. And I mean, that had to do with carrying and things like that, or maybe, I'm not sure, it's not musical instrument, I don't think, but it has to do with laws of Shabbat, and that it's different when it's all when it's all in Jerusalem. And for example, matzah on Pesach is a biblical commandment. Everybody with me on that? What about maror? Who knows? Is maror biblical or rabbinic today? It's probably rabbinic, yeah, because I kind of gave you a lead in on that one. Why is it rabbinic? Because the biblical mitzvah of maror is only when it's eaten with the korban Pesach, the Paschal lamb. But the sages didn't want us to just stop eating maror because it's such a big part of our experience on Pesach, on Seder night. So there were many, that's I think what Moshe meant when he said putting it in the hands of, the rabbinic Judaism. A lot of things that were biblical now became rabbinic for whatever reason, okay? One of the things that was kept, if our liturgy, even though we don't have the trumpets and we don't do all that in everyday davening. Nobody brings trumpets as far as I know. I mean, there is shofar before Rosh Hashanah, but we keep the Shir Shel Yom, the Psalm of the day. And part of that is so that we will remember what was done in the Beit HaMikdash. Okay. So the main thing that the Gemara tells us, I don't have this, you can look it up on Sfari if you want, but the main, and it's actually in Rosh Hashanah, this explanation, I don't know if there's a Gemara on Tamid, was this. Okay, the Gemara expands on the topic of daily Psalms. It is taught in a Braita. Braita is a Mishnah that didn't make it into the compendium of Mishnayot, that Rabbi Akiva said, on the first day of the week, what psalm would they recite? LaHashem ha'aretz u'mlo'ah. The earth is God and its fullness. Why? In commemoration of the first day of creation. LaHashem ha'aretz. We're going to go into it. We will get to each psalm. But this is talking about what Judy Stiglitz said, that perhaps, does that make sense also? 7 days of the week? Maybe find a psalm that corresponds to whatever God created. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Right? There is a logic to that. It's not foolproof, but there is a connection. So the first one, it's in Psalm 24, just so you know. You can open up a Siddur if you want. Every Siddur, as far as I know, will have it. We'll have which Psalms you say on what day. In commemoration of the first day of creation, this is a translation of the Gemara, because on that day, God acquired the world and transferred it to man. And God was the only ruler in that world. According to the Gemara, the angels were even only created until the second day. So that first pasuk, LaHashem ha'aretz, that all of the land belongs to God, umlo'ah, and everything that's in it, that would be a good enough reason to say that psalm. Now, it could be there are other verses in the psalm that aren't so relevant, but sometimes that happens. Like there's a little hook. Everybody good with that? Let's go to the second day. On the second day of the week, what psalm? Great is the Lord and highly to be praised in the city of our God, God's sacred mountain, because on the second day of creation, God separated God's works, dividing between the upper waters and lower waters, and ruled over them as king. On the third day, I'm just reading the whole thing in English. They would recite the psalm beginning, God stands in the congregation of God, of the Lord, because on the third day, God revealed the land. So you can't stand until there is land and God, right? And remember again, the verse that they're quoting is God stands, and which is in Elokim nitzav ba'adat el. Nitzav means standing at attention, like the Parsha of Nitzavim. A little noisy here, sorry. On the fourth day of the week, they would recite the psalm, O Lord God, to whom vengeance belonged, because on the fourth day of creation, God created the sun and the moon. And the moon, this is a little wild, and in the future, God will punish and take vengeance upon those who worship the sun and moon. So that feels a little more forced, just saying. But it's interesting because it goes to monotheism, that God created the sun and the moon, but doesn't want, maybe it's not, that comes from the word vengeance, that doesn't have sun and moon. Like it would be better if the psalm on Wednesday had sun and moon in it. But they found a connection because you know what? The rabbis of the Talmud were also struggling with why did they pick these psalms? And you know what? It could be that they weren't right about it all. Could be. Yeah. And that's okay too. And by the way, as we go through, I'm happy I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is that the 7 days of the week only correspond to creation. It's random. I want to take a pause and say, let's think about time for a moment. The day of the week is marked by nature. You don't have to superimpose the times of the day. It happens naturally. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. We won't talk about the North Pole, but in general, the month is also appears in nature. The month appears in nature, right? Because the moon goes from small to big to small again. Month just appears in nature. That time is marked by our natural laws. A year is also marked by nature because fall happens, right? Once a year, spring, right? The sun comes nearer and farther, it's colder, it's hotter. Again, let's not talk about the equator, but it does happen naturally. But the unit of time that we call a week, does that happen in nature?
No.
If we hadn't have got at the beginning of our Torah, if it hadn't said on the first day, this is great, on the second day, on the third day, on the fourth day, on the fifth day, on the sixth, and then on seventh day, Shabbat rested, but then it wouldn't be, it would just be every day, one after the other. And by the way, you should know that somebody tried somewhere to change the week from 7 to 12 days. It didn't work. It stayed with 7 everywhere in the world. I mean, I can't tell you if there are, tribes in a jungle who don't do it like that. I can't tell you. But in the more civilized world, or the world that we're connected with, all over the world, 7 days. That comes from our Torah. So it makes sense that you would want to ascribe the Psalm of the day to one of the days of creation, which, by the way, Lance, isn't a full answer, but that could be reason why 150 wasn't chosen, because it doesn't have
That's
to do.
good.
Could
That's
be. It
excellent.
doesn't have anything to do with any days of the week.
That's
Well, that
excellent.
could be a reason. Okay.
A+.
Excellent. Oh, that's good from a professor. That feels good. Okay. On the 5th day, the Levites would recite the psalm beginning, Harninu lelokim uzenu, sing aloud to God our strength, because on the 5th day of creation, God created birds and fish to praise God's name. On the 6th day, now, I just want to say something else. When the subcommittee of which, of the rabbis, of the sages, of which psalm, they may have sat down and said, oh, let's connect it to the days of the week. And then they just couldn't find psalms that connected directly, right? Maybe there isn't a psalm that has fishes and birds. That's very possible. I haven't gone through all 150 of them to check. So they said, you know what? Let's make some connection to the days of the week. So it actually is kind of ingenious for them to pick psalms that have some connection, and then for the rabbis of the Talmud to try to figure out what was the connection that you made. I think it's kind of cool, actually, that they did that. It's a little bit of a mystery, to figure it out. On the 6th day of the week, they recite the psalm, the Lord reigns, the Lord is clothed with majesty, because on that day, God completed labor, ruled over all creation in full glory. And I would add to that, which isn't in the Gemara, God created man, who's the one who most can praise God, is man and women. And on the 7th day, they would recite a psalm for the song of the day of Shabbat. Okay, that one's easy. Mizmor Shir Liyom Shabbat. Okay, that one is like a no-brainer. That was Mizmor. Halavai, I wish that we would have had a psalm that said, this is the first day of the week, this is the second, but that's not what happened. Shabbat has its own. And then, okay, Rabbi Nechemia adds, what did the sages see that led them to distinguish between these chapters? So maybe this is an answer. I haven't seen, as they interpret the psalm recited on the 6 weekdays referring to the past, and the one recited on Shabbat referring to the future, which we'll get into when we learn it. Rather, you know what? Actually, I'm gonna come back to this when we learn that. I'm gonna come back to this because I feel like we need to learn about them to actually get it. Okay. All right, everybody with me on that?
Yep.
All right. Now, Rabbi Raymond Apple, or Appel, I don't know, Apple. Do everybody here remember the Septuagint?
Yeah.
What the Septuagint were? There were 70 scholars, rabbis who were, at least according to our tradition, were put in 70 different rooms, and they all had to translate the Torah, the whole Bible. And the miracle, it was miraculous that they all did it the same, because there were certain words that could be, anytime you translate, it's a commentary. Everybody agree? Especially in Hebrew, where words can have different meanings. The same word has different meanings depending on the context. So again, according to our tradition, it was called LXX, which in Roman numerals is 70. And 1 second. So he says like this, Some texts of the Septuagint dated as early as the 2nd century BCE have titles that identify other daily psalms with the exception of those for Tuesday and Thursday. So I wonder if that means that there were different traditions, but they think that these particular psalms on set days must have been established as early as the period of the Second Temple, which is something that Lance asked. And one second, what I wanted to add is something else. The Zohar, mystical. The Zohar moves the daily psalms onto a historical plane and declares that the 7 psalms represent 7,000-year periods. Now, how many years do we believe, like the Hebrew year, who knows, the Jewish year?
5,000.
So we're in the 6th millennia, according to that, right? Okay, ready? The first period is called a day, meaning Yom Rishon day, because a different psalm says that 1,000 years in God's eyes are like yesterday. And that's representing the millennium up to the flood. So we can look for hints when we start to learn Sunday. The second is the period in which Mount Moriah, I just mentioned that, my daughter's name is Moriah, was chosen, symbolized by Psalm 48. We're going to check these as we go through. The third one is the millennia in which the Torah, remember, in between the flood and the Torah, I guess, was 1,000 years. So there you go. That's helpful to make a timeline. Psalm 82 suggested when the Torah was given. The fourth is an era in which the temple was destroyed. The fifth was the historic period when Judaism survived without a temple. By the way, we're still in that one. The sixth is the millennium in which God resumes God's rule. And the seventh is the messianic future. So I suggest that we look at that, what the Zohar says when we learn it. And he mentions that there are poems that do that have hints to it. Does anybody know? Very well-known poems in our ritual. I won't say in our liturgy exactly, sort of liturgy. And one of them is coming up soon. There's a hint. Oh, sure. Got somebody whispering to me on the side. Stacey, thank you.
Hanukkah.
So right, Hanukkah, Ma'os, Sor Yeshuati. So that also, many people, and you look at it, you'll see there are hints to each one. It talks about Esther and Shushan, and it talks about Yevanim, the Greeks. So there's a hint to that. And there's another one, which is not as obvious, and we sing it on Seder night. It's the last song of the night. It's Chad Gadya. So it seems to be about animals, but many people interpret it as each of the animals represents a different stage in our history. Okay, this is really cool. And we're going to try, I didn't make a table. I didn't have time to do this. Somebody named Dr. Rachel Reich in Bar Ilan University says this. She says, if you take all 7 Psalms, the name of God shifts and moves according to the Psalm. First word, second word, third word, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. So it's not 100%, but it's very, very, very close. And he says, even she admits it's not watertight and also doubtful whether the priests and poets of the first and second temples would use something like that. But I thought it was kind of cool that would be a more mechanical way of doing it. There's no clear reason why particular psalms were designated to be recited on different days of the week. Because as we saw, even the most obvious, which is the days of creation, some of them were a little bit forced. But I still think that it's important to remember that people looked for connections because we all like connections. And no matter what, for people who daven every day, Wednesday is kind of the worst day of the week. Why?
The longest one.
It's the longest one. Like, oh, Tuesday is great. It's really short. And Wednesday is the longest. And then Friday, it's a song that we sing also Friday night very often. Na, 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 na. There's often tunes that are associated with that.
And it talks about God of vengeance.
It talks about a God of vengeance. Okay, Stacey has a question. Ask the group.
What was the Zohar?
What was the Zohar? I don't know the source. I'd have to look it up. It's in Aramaic. But what she's asking, let me recap what the Zohar said. The Zohar says, luckily I wrote it down because who remembers that? So it's not, so we're now in the 6th millennia, right? So that would be the 5th Psalm, which is the historic period when Judaism survived without a temple. That is now. Remember I said we reinvented. I want to say, I know it sounds heretical, but it doesn't feel heretical to me. I think there's something so gorgeous about the rabbis and the sages reimagining Judaism and putting it back into our hands. Because I think that during the temple, people said, oh, the Kohanim and the Leviim, like they're the only ones who have a real role. We have less of a role, and maybe the rabbis, maybe the prophets, I don't know. But now we all can take part. All of us can sit and learn. We're all sitting and learning together. And I know this group, I know from past classes, how many beautiful thoughts and interpretations you've given when we learn together. Remember, it's always much more beautiful when we learn together. I prepare, and then this group comes up with gorgeous explanations and thoughts about it. So I think there's something really awesome about being in this millennia, even though we all pray for the temple. So I'm not taking that away. And I guess I would hope that the temple will come back without animal offerings. I have a hard time with that also, but we can't really discuss it because I don't know if anybody's real, like I'm not setting it up and nobody else is either. So we're not there yet. Okay, so Stacy asked, what was it? So the Zohar actually very nicely found a nice way to correlate each of the Psalms with a millennia. No, millennium. Which one is the singular?
Millennium.
Millennium is one. Yeah, like a lum, right? Okay.
Millennia.
So millennia is the plural. So there's the first and the second and third. So when we go through, we're going to keep this piece of paper and see if we can figure out a correspondence as we go through. Okay, so all of that was an introduction as to why we're going to be learning what we're learning. And I wanted to maybe give a taste. I don't think we'll really get into the first Psalm yet. We'll do that next time. But I do want to read the first Psalm and we will repeat it. The first Psalm is 24. I'll read it in English and I'll read it through Geya Aronoff Bernstein's, which is this gorgeous poem that she wrote on each of the Psalms. She wrote in Hebrew and in English. It's amazing work. So prolific. Okay, Psalm 24. Everybody got Psalm 24? You can take it from a Siddur. For all of our teaching now, for the next however many weeks it'll take us, you can use a Siddur or a Tanakh because all of the Psalms are in the Siddur. Why are they in the Siddur?
Because every day.
Because it's part of the davening. Thank you, Elaine. Okay, just waking up those who maybe, fell asleep. What did you say? Oh, the noise. It's okay. There's a golden age, beautiful program happening after this, so they're just putting out the food. Okay. LeDavid Mizmor, to David. So LeDavid Mizmor really means a psalm by David, but it's flipped. What are we used to? Mizmor LeDavid. Mizmor LeDavid, right? That's
Right.
much more common. In fact, the psalm we say for Shabbat is Mizmor LeDavid, but we will talk about that next time, why it is flipped and what it could mean. LeDavid Mizmor, LaHashem ha'aretz umlo'ah tevel v'yoshvei ba. The earth belongs to God with everything that is on it, the world and all who live in it. I think this one actually gives a pretty direct connection to creation on the first day. Because the first day there was nothing and God created something. Everybody with me on that? And according to what we learned, that the rabbi said that even the angels who you might imagine might have been created, well, they weren't created yet. God founded it on the seas and fixed it upon the waters. We do know that most of the world is made of water. Who will go up to the mountain of God? Who will stand in God's holy place? Who will do that? And I have more to teach and to learn about this next time. The one whose hands are clean, whose heart is pure, was not sworn in vain by God's name. This is part of the 10 Commandments, or taken an oath with deceit. That's a person who can be in God's place, whatever that means. He will receive God's blessing and kindness from the God who will save him. There you go. That's your homework. Do everything that's in verse 4. The hands are clean, heart is pure. Don't swear in vain in God's name. Don't take an oath with deceit. You'll be good for next week. He is part of the generation that searches for God, Jacob's descendant looking for God's presence. It's interesting that Jacob is used and not Israel. This week's Parsha is when Jacob gets the name Israel, Yisrael. So how timely to talk about this. The holy temple gates, lift your beams. Doors forever holy be uplifted. Let the King of Glory enter. Misa melech hakavod. Who is the King of Glory? Hashem mizuz v'gibor. God the mighty and great. Hashem gibor melchama. God who is powerful in war. Holy temple gates, lift your wings. I have a great story to tell you about that. Doors forever holy, raise yourselves. Let the King of Glory enter. Who is the King of Glory? Hashem Tzvaot. So this is a new name for God, newish name for God. It is God. It says here rules the angels. It could also mean hosts, King of hosts. Hu Melech HaKavod Selah. He's the King of Glory. Selah, again, I'll talk about that next time. I just want to read how Gaia wrote the poem. Do you want to read it, Stacy? You want to read it for us? Why don't you read it? 1 second, let me turn. I'm going to let our guest read it, welcoming her into our group. Let's read it nicely.
Okay. It's all God's. The endless universe and everything within belong to him. God set up oceans, patterns, galaxies, and DNA. So who of us could ever reach the top to rise above ourselves, to keep our hearts and deeds as pure as God's intent? Perhaps it's those who seek to know his ways, those blessed in the endeavor, in the quest to find and open gates of heaven, to see God, the source of all unknown.
Whoa, beautiful. Got the gates in there too. Thank you. I will read it again, of course, but I will leave us with Gaia's beautiful words in our ears, reverberating. And if anybody has questions, thoughts, comments, I'm happy to hear, because that's what we're going to learn next time. Yes, Judy.
Okay, I have a question.
And then Robert. We'll both look together.
As October 8th Jews, we are post a very important date of October 7th. Analogously, when the people were post the Churban, or they lived through the Churban, that's analogous to what I'm trying to say to October 8th. And we say Tehillim, for the Shavuyim, that when they were, et cetera, all kinds of things regarding hope or faithfulness, or even thankful for those who survived. Why are the days of the week, why is that more important than being able to connect with Hashem through these type of psalms?
I don't think I understood what your question, Judy. I'm sorry. I don't understand I don't get the question. Sorry.
Okay. The question is, how were the Jews of the time of the destruction? Why did they not come up with, or why didn't they say rather psalms like Mizmor LaTodah?
Why do you think that they didn't say them? This is just part of our davening.
Okay.
That doesn't preclude. I mean, you do that today too. If you daven, you say Psalm of the day, but you also gather with people to say Tehillim. Why does one preclude the other?
Okay.
And why are you assuming that one precludes the other?
Right. Okay. All right.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. Robert, you had a question?
See in the Psalm for Monday, the second day,
Yeah.
we know that Korach, who challenged Moshe.
Do you want to save this for when we learn the Monday
No,
one?
there's a point about the second one that I learned that from a rabbi that Korach was destroyed. The earth swallowed him up. Yet beginning of this psalm, the second psalm, it says a psalm by the sons of Korach. So
whoa. We're going to have lots to talk about when we get there.
Right.
Save it, no? Wait, 1 second, Robert.
Some of the sons didn't join us. Some of the sons survived.
No, we know that. But wait, you're jumping the gun. We haven't even done Sunday yet. You're already on.
Okay.
Please save that thought. But because it's going to be hard to remember if we give comments on all the different psalms. Let's do it according to the days. And please, I'm happy that you'll share that. But let's do it according to the order.
Okay.
It's easier for us to absorb it and remember it. Felice, you wanted to say?
Yeah, just a quick comment. The only psalm that we ever say in the nighttime, the Arif, is on when? Yom Kippur, you say L'Dov Mizmor.
About the first one. Yeah, not just Yom Kippur. Yes, very good. I mean, we say other psalms. You're talking about the Sunday.
No, but I'm talking about on Sunday.
Also Rosh Hashanah. And we will talk about that next time. Yes, very good. Good memory, by the way. And not only that, we say it responsively, right? So it's important.
Right.
And that's a good point. Anybody who wants to can research that for next week.
We will research it.
All right, my friend.
Tell Lance to do that. That would be good for Lance to do.
Whoever wants to do it, will do it.